The iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max are defined by their refinements. This pair of phones is one of the most compelling camera upgrades from Apple in years. The 15 Pro has a tried-and-true 3x telephoto camera like previous models. But the 15 Pro Max has a new 5x telephoto camera that's made with multiple prisms and some clever engineering. Let's talk about cameras. Watch till the end for details. Please hit the subscribe button. Pro camera system 48 megapixel. Main 24mm f1.78 aperture. Second generation sensor shift optical image stabilization. 100% focus pixels. Support for super high resolution photos. 24 megapixel and 48 megapixel. 12 megapixel ultra wide. 13mm f2.2 aperture and 120-degree field of view. 100% focus. Pixels 12 megapixel 2x telephoto, enabled by quad pixel sensor. 48mm f1.78 aperture. Second generation sensor shift optical image stabilization. 100% focus. Pixels 12 megapixel 3x telephoto. 77mm f2.8 aperture. Optical image stabilization. 3x optical zoom in. 2x optical zoom out. 6x optical zoom range. Digital zoom up to 15x. iPhone 15 Pro Max. Pro camera system 48 megapixel main. 24mm f1.78 aperture. Second generation sensor shift optical image stabilization. 100% focus pixels. Support for super high resolution photos. 24 megapixels and 48 megapixels. 12 megapixel ultra wide. 13mm f2.22 aperture and 120-degree field of view. 100% focus. Pixels 12 megapixel 2x telephoto enabled by quad pixel sensor. 48mm f1.78 aperture. Second generation sensor shift optical image stabilization. 100%. Focus pixels 12 megapixels. 5x telephoto. 120mm f2.8 aperture. 3D sensor shift optical image stabilization and autofocus. Tetraprism design. 5x optical zoom in. 2x optical zoom out. 10x optical zoom range. Digital zoom up to 25x. Both models. Customizable default lens. Main. Sapphire crystal lens cover. Adaptive true tone. Flash. Photonic engine. Deep fusion. Smart. HDR. 5. Next generation portraits with focus and depth. Control. Portrait lighting with 6 effects. Night mode. Night mode portraits enabled by LiDAR scanner panorama up to 63 megapixels. Photographic styles macro photography. Apple Pro RAW wide color capture for photos and live photos. Lens correction ultra wide. Advanced red eye correction, auto image stabilization. Burst mode, photo geotagging image formats captured. EIF, JPEG, and DNG. Let's talk about video recording. 4K video recording at 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second. 1080p HD video recording at 25 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second. 720p HD video recording at 30 frames per second. Cinematic mode up to 4K HDR at 30 frames per second. Action mode up to 2.8K at 60 frames per second. Spatial video recording at 1080p at 30 frames per second. HDR video recording with Dolby Vision up to 4K at 60 frames per second. ProRes video recording up to 4K at 60 frames per second with external recording. Log video recording. Academy color encoding system. Macro video recording including slow-mo and time-lapse. Slow-mo video support for 1080p at 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second. Time-lapse video with stabilization. Night mode. Time-lapse. Quick take video. Second generation sensor shift optical image Stabilization for video, main. Optical image stabilization for video, 3x telephoto. 3D sensor shift optical image stabilization and autofocus for video, 5x telephoto. Digital zoom up to 9x, iPhone 15 Pro, and 15x, iPhone 15 Pro Max. Audio zoom. True tone flash. Cinematic video stabilization, 4K, 1080p, and 720p. Continuous autofocus video. Take 8 megapixel still photos while recording 4K video. Playback zoom. Video formats recorded, HEVC, H.264, and ProRes, stereo recording. True depth. Camera 12. Megapixel camera, f1.9 aperture. Autofocus with focus pixels. Retina, flash, photonic engine, deep fusion, smart, HDR. 5 next-generation portraits, with focus and depth control portrait, lighting with 6 effects, Animoji and Emoji night mode. Photographic styles, Apple ProRAW. Wide color capture for photos and live photos. Lens correction, auto image, stabilization. Burst mode, 4K video recording at 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 fps 1080p HD video recording at 25 fps, 30 fps, or 60 fps. Cinematic mode up to 4K HDR at 30 fps HDR video recording, with Dolby Vision up to 4K at 60 fps ProRes video recording. Up to 4K at 60 fps with external recording. Log Video Recording Academy Color Encoding System. Slow-mo video support for 1080p at 120 frames per second. Time-lapse video with stabilization night mode. Time-lapse quick-take video. Cinematic video stabilization. 4K, 1080p, and 720p. Face ID. Enabled by TrueDepth camera for facial recognition Apple Pay. Pay with your iPhone using Face ID in stores, within apps, and on the web. Send and receive money and messages with Apple Cash. For complete purchases made with Apple Pay on your Mac Pay for your ride. Using Express Transit 5 Safety Emergency SOS via Satellite 8, Crash Detection 9, Roadside Assistance via Satellite 8. Thanks for watching. See you in next video.